And thanks, Omri, for the invitation. I think I'm one of the worst rogue people. I sent the wrong CV. I got the time wrong. So I'm going to try and get through as much as I possibly can. But I'm working on the basis of there's some good evidence from attention research that says in any 15-minute period, people only remember one thing 24 hours later. So maybe we can talk about what that is afterwards. I'm based in Stellenbosch University. We have a research group currently working in Lesotho, in Kenya. We've done work in Zambia, Mozambique, and Malawi, and quite a lot of work in Cape Town, and quite a lot actually in Eastern Cape with Dr. Ingrid LaRue and others. And you can look at our website for more details. I know this meeting's about Thrive, but actually the fact that we can focus on Thrive is because actually for a long time we've made absolutely amazing strides in Survive. And I just want, as a Thrive person, I just actually want to note that. And 48 million children alive today is not a small thing. And essentially there's another 48 million in the same period of time that we still need to work on in the next 20 years, but I think that's really, really important. And this whole idea of Thrive is, I think people in this room probably buy into it without question. But I also think, and while I'm fundamentally located in almost all the research I have done, am doing, and probably will do is going to be in this first 1,000 days, I also want to be a little bit of a stirrer here and talk about how Thrive is actually not about the first 1,000 days. Thrive is about women who will become pregnant through to the 18th birthday or later of the unborn child, and that it's a long life course perspective, and I'll speak more to that as we go. The Lancet Early Child Development Series was launched a month ago. The South African launch is in fact next week in Pretoria, and this is the third in a series of Lancet papers, really painting a picture that despite these gains in survival, we still have a very long way to go. David spoke eloquently about stunting. The World Bank has basically decided that stunting is going to be their thing that they're going to focus on in the next 15 years, linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, and that a huge number of children, 250 million, are not meeting their developmental potential. And I think that's where a lot of us come in. But I believe in evidence. I love randomized controlled trials, and I'm a public health person. So the study on the left there is a very interesting study. It was published in The Lancet about a month ago. So many of you as children would have been given an egg to care for a week. And somehow that would give you an idea of what parenting's like, right? So the Australians have now perfected it. They've developed this brilliant doll that is incredibly lifelike, that cries, that looks like a baby. And so they gave it to a group of adolescent girls in Western Australia that are at risk of adolescent pregnancies. And they've been implementing this and assuming that this will be a very successful intervention. So someone decided to do a randomized controlled trial, and it was incredibly effective. So if the doll was given to adolescent girls, they were more likely to become pregnant. Much more likely to become pregnant, because adolescent girls know this is only a doll. No matter how lifelike it is, they know it's only a doll. And that you can leave it at home, and you can leave it, and it's nothing, no harm is going to come to it. And so all that happened is it glamorized motherhood. And they became pregnant. So I'm a fundamental believer in evidence. The Disney videos, the playing music to the Mozart movies, to music to the brains of your fetus or whatever, they don't work, and most often they do harm. So I really think that evidence is absolutely essential. And I'm going to talk about, we've done a number of studies. I had to take one of them out. I'm sorry, David, because DG Murray Trust funded our book sharing work because of time. So I want to talk about two studies, randomized controlled trials we've done. I'm not going to go into lots of details about the actual results. I'll touch on them. I really want to just kind of paint a picture of them. I can send papers if necessary. And then some of the lessons from that. So Palani, we work with Dr. Ingrid LaRue and Kwani and others. Palani, for those of you who don't know, is a local NGO that's existed for over 30 years. We've been funded by the NIAAA originally, then by LIFA, and we've now been following this cohort. It's a home visiting program, with community health workers, mentor mothers at the core of it. and it starts in pregnancy and it works through the first year of life. It's a cluster randomized controlled trial in Khayelitsha and Mfuleni. There's a mentor mother or community health worker in each cluster or neighborhood. Each neighborhood is about 450 to 500 neighborhoods. We recruited initially almost 1,300 pregnant women. It's designed around, at the time, around the re-engineered primary health care system. So the idea being that it tried to resemble as closely the community health worker model that was going to be introduced. So it wasn't just about HIV or just about nutrition, or in my second study I'll tell you about just about, in that case, mother-infant interaction. But it was really a generalist intervention that covered a huge array of content, from maternal mental health to accessing the child grant, reducing alcohol use, and a number of areas. And as I said, began antenatally, went through the postnatal period, and the number of visits wasn't specific. Very often we have interventions where it's 2 antenatal visits, 2 postnatal visits in the first week, and then it's very prescribed. We try to have it a little bit more flexible to allow for community health workers and mentor mothers to adapt to the reality of the homes that they were visiting. So far, we've conducted a baseline. We've conducted an assessment 2 weeks after birth, 6 months, 18 months, 3 years, and 5 years. And in fact, we heard on Wednesday, I think, we've just got funding from Alma Foundation to follow this up at the sample up at 7.5 years. So we'll be doing. So it's a nice longitudinal study. And we've published, and this is just a smattering of the papers that we've published on this study. And we've had a series of very, very positive results from the study on nutrition, on the PMT-TCT cascade, on reducing alcohol use, and some of those outcomes have persisted all the way to 3 years, for example. We're busy analyzing the 5-year outcomes. We don't have any of those. But at 3 years, for example, we had a very interesting one just for the child people. We had an impact on child language, which is quite interesting because the intervention itself wasn't directly focused on child language, but we had an impact on that. So for us, that's quite an interesting thing to think about. And following on what Simone was saying, some very interesting outcomes linked to antenatal depression. So mothers who are antenatally depressed in pregnancy, even with the depression not being improved by the intervention, had children who were less stunted and had better cognitive scores at 18 months. The second study, and obviously I can speak to people if you're interested. The second study is the Tulasana Mother-Infant Intervention. This was a study we did a long time ago. Here's some of the partners. It was originally funded by Wellcome Trust, and we, a couple of years ago, together with people like Barack and that in the room, conducted a follow-up when the children of the study were 13 years old. This was also home visiting, was conducted in Cape Town, in Khayelitsha, and this was really focusing on sensitive mother-infant interaction. And we were interested in seeing does home visiting through pregnancy into the postnatal period, using components that Catherine spoke about of the MBO and others, whether that could sensitize mothers, improve interaction, and then improve secure attachment that Astrid was talking about. We followed those infants and caregivers up until the infants were 18 months, and then, as I said, we followed them up again 13 or 12 years later. And we weren't focusing on treating or even screening for maternal depression, but there was a trend. It wasn't significant, but something was happening in that intervention. We suspect what was happening is that the maybe women that were more mildly depressed were having their mood impressed, but more severely that wasn't happening. There was less intrusiveness and improved sensitivity at 6 months, less intrusiveness at 12, and higher levels of secure attachment at 18 months. So we were very happy with those results. And then we lost track of that sample. We didn't have funding, but then managed to secure funding from Grand Challenges Canada. And we managed to re-enroll 74% of that sample 11 years later, which we had a full-time recruiter for a year and a half, and that's all they did. And I think, if I remember, we found people in 62 towns in South Africa. It gives you an idea of people's movement and migration. And then we paid for them to come to Cape Town to do the assessments. I don't know if Barack's going to talk about the one finding on the 13 years old, but he's shaking his head, but I'm going to make him do it if he's got time. I don't want to go into too much, but we have a very interesting finding of reanalyzing our sample. So we published a number of papers on the original trial, and one of the things we were very interested in, and this speaks to the lessons that I'll touch on very, very briefly, is that we were very interested in, it was Grand Challenges Canada Saving Brains grant making mechanism. We were very interested to see, does this early benefit we had on secure attachment and other things, does that persist at age 13? So this life course perspective. And the answer is sadly no. So there's no difference in the cognitive development of children at age 13. This intervention wasn't directly focusing on cognitive development, so maybe it's no surprise. But it does speak to the complexities, and that while we want things to work and while we want things to obviously have benefit, and we want that to persist, they may not. And so I just want to touch on some lessons that I think some of our results speak to. The one is, I want to say something about parenting. There are two terms in global health right now that are being thrown around all the time. One's parenting, the other's scaling up. Everybody wants to scale up. If you're writing a grant and you don't put the phrase scaling up, you're not going to get funded. Even if you don't know what that means, but you must put it in. And with parenting, I think we've got to be careful. I think there's a danger in anybody, whether it's me or whether it's anybody else, saying we know how people must parent their children. That in fact parenting support, and that's why I like the title of this, is really important, is that for many, many, many parents, the real issue in their lives is not that they don't know what to do, that there's too many barriers in their environment to allow them to do that. And so if we don't help them with the support to deal with the barriers, you can teach as much as you want and you can provide as much insight, it's not going to sit. So I think that's, for me, really, really important. It can't be a didactic, I know best. Second, that it's a life course approach, that in fact, as you go, the reality is no matter what we do, and I might have a robust discussion with Niels about this, resilience starts in the first 1,000 minutes, but it isn't formed in the first 1,000 minutes. And it can be destroyed very easily later on. That these toxic environments that many of our children are living in make it very difficult for these things to persist. And we have to be thinking, it's not good enough to say we're doing something really great in the first 1,000 days and now we can walk away. We have to keep doing things, and we have to find out which children need more things later and which ones actually this early boost may be enough. And we have to think about that at some level, whether it's universal or targeting, I'm not sure. So I think that the first 1,000 days is necessary, absolutely, but it's not sufficient. We also have to accept that some things we may not be able to do. That quote I had is, sometimes it's maybe better to do nothing, is if you're living, for example, WASH is sort of water and sanitation interventions. If you're living in a situation where you have an open sewage drain outside your house, unless you have 70% coverage of good WASH interventions, structural interventions to make sure that that open sewage isn't there, washing your hands probably will have minimal effects because the environment is again so toxic. And we have to say, kind of with that in mind, where's the best place to put money in that situation? And is it with teaching people to wash hands, or is it putting all the money in to have waterborne sewage or something? We have to think of this all the time. And just because we want something to be true and effective doesn't mean it's going to. Changing parenting is staggeringly difficult. I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. I have everything going for me. I have money, I have education, I have a good marriage, I have everything. Everything's going for me. And boy, do I do things sometimes that I think, wow, how did I do that? What's this about? It's incredibly difficult, and it's incredibly difficult to change it and for that to last. And we have to accept that, and we have to live that. And that, for example, sending an SMS about parenting will not change parenting. And we can wish it to be true, but it won't. That in fact, and I think Catherine was touching on it, people change. And one of my mentors is the information is essential. I'm not minimizing the role of information. But that she said to me once is that people change, slowly, over time, in relationships with lots of opportunities to practice. And if we don't have all of those in our parenting support interventions or our parenting interventions, I think we may be not wasting. We may be not as effective as we would like to be. And I suppose finally, just to say some humility, that I think that's what I loved about all these talks that came before me, is I've known everybody who spoke before for many years, and people have all been in this for the long haul, and whether it's Astrid or Ingrid and everybody, people are in it for the long haul, and everybody, I don't think anyone's pretending that they're going to change the world. Everyone's in their passionate little corner fighting their fight or whatever, and I think that's amazing, and I feel privileged to be part of this group. Thank you.